You think this is the real Quaid? It is.
We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Like we never left. In the car for episode 202 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for taking this Saturday early evening drive home with me here in New York. And if you catch this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you get this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So today marks 34 years since the release of Paul Verhoeven's phenomenal adaptation of Philip K. Dick's science fiction novel. And tell me if you remember the name of the movie. We can remember it for you wholesale. No, you can't. Because the name of the movie was Total Recall. Philip K. Dick's original novel, upon which the movie Total Recall was based, was called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which kind of makes sense when we think about the movie itself. Is there's a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth of memory and implanted memories. And is there any difference if we just have the memory that we, let's say, took a vacation, saved the world? Is there any difference to our brains whether we did it or not? I don't know. Real high-minded science fiction level shit, though. And a science fiction master, as Philip K. Dick was. Most of his famous books were written heavily under the influence of psychedelics. He wrote We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. I think he was on LSD, and who knows whatever else. And the same with Blade Runner, which was originally titled Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That title doesn't quite relate to Blade Runner as much as We Can Remember It For You Wholesale relates to Total Recall. So Total Recall was a film project which it first took root in the early 80s. And there was an idea that David Cronenberg, who had done The Brood and he'd done Scanners, he was a filmmaker who had a very interesting eye and was not afraid of body horror. And he did body horror certainly in Videodrome, another one of his. And then he would go on to do The Fly. But there was a version, like if we reboot The Matrix, as I'm fond of saying, there's a version of The Matrix in which David Cronenberg did not end up making The Fly, famously with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis and John Getz, among others. But he ended up making Total Recall. As crazy as it seems, because the sci-fi elements were right in his wheelhouse, they were right in Cronenberg's wheelhouse. But the actor who was set to play Doug Quaid in the David Cronenberg version of Total Recall, which would have shot probably 1985, right around at the same time as what ended up being The Fly, as far as the filming schedule, Richard Dreyfuss. I have no idea what anybody was thinking, or, I mean, I kind of know what they were smoking or snorting or shooting up, but it's impossible to conceive. But yes, Richard Dreyfuss was set. Now, what Cronenberg has talked about, this is, again, I would love to say this, but it's true. Most of the information I'm going to give you is easily accessible. And Cronenberg discussed the fact that when he was getting ready to mount the production, they didn't really have an ending. And they were working on this, because if you've seen the film, there's the way to turn on the reactor was to, Arnold, the way that for him to, or anybody to turn on the reactor is to put your hand on this sort of a platform, and that will start the chain reaction of this reactor turning on in Mars. Sorry, a little bit of sun there. Cronenberg wanted there to be some tie-in with the character of Quaid that he had been to Mars, and since he had been to Mars, he's the only person that can trigger the reactor. But they just couldn't figure out how to do it. And Cronenberg was convinced that that was a very important element, that it couldn't just be anybody putting his hand on the thing and triggering it, that it had to be Quaid, that he had some kind of signature, like a palm print kind of thing. Well, that's not really in the movie that we saw. But Cronenberg ended up leaving the project, and I love the guy, but thank goodness they didn't make that movie with Richard Dreyfuss. I mean, what are you doing? What are you even thinking? I mean, it didn't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. It could have been another actor. It could have been a Costner, would have been very young at the time, or a Kevin Kline. It could have been anybody. Not Richard Dreyfuss. I don't have any, I like Richard Dreyfuss as an actor, but, I mean, give me a fucking break. Couldn't have been him. But I digress. Cronenberg drops out, Dreyfuss drops out, and it was good for Richard Dreyfuss's career because he ended up doing another Stakeout, not another Stakeout, and then he did Moon Over Parador. I mean, Dreyfuss was working steadily. He did a lot of really good work in that era, even though he was having a lot of personal problems. But Paul Verhoeven, the Dutch filmmaker, who had done a number of movies with Rutger Hauer in Europe, such as Soldier of Orange, and a very talented filmmaker. And Paul Verhoeven, who had done the original RoboCop as well, he expressed interest. And I don't know the exact mechanics of how Arnold got involved, but what I do know is that Arnold ended up taking a lead of Doug Quaid, but something that they ended up not going with. Verhoeven didn't give a shit about this concept of it has to be his handprint in particular because of some cockamamie reasoning that they were coming up with. Movie doesn't need it. Sometimes adding extras like that to kind of tie the story together, Clint Eastwood in The Line of Fire, to me adds a lot more to the story, knowing that this Secret Service agent isn't simply saving this president, but he's trying to make up for the fact that he failed Kennedy when Kennedy was assassinated. This story didn't need Doug Quaid to be the only person who could trigger the reactor, and that was part of him understanding all of these memories and the implant, the cap, and all of this shit. Wasn't necessary. So Verhoeven had a very, very significant budget, and he was able to get the cast he wanted. He wanted Sharon Stone. He liked what she did in Action Jackson, even though her role is very limited there, but he liked what she did in Action Jackson, and he handpicked her. He wanted her to play the wife, the kind of critical role of Laurie, which in the Total Recall reboot, which is not very good, as much as I love Colin Farrell. Excuse me. Kate Beckinsale, even though the remake is not very good, Kate Beckinsale is absolute fire in that. She's the best thing about that movie. But Sharon in Verhoeven and Arnold, Total Recall, is dynamite. She is absolute dynamite. And she showed an ability to engage with the camera that she maybe hadn't quite mastered earlier in her career, but she helps to make the movie what it is, because the performance is layered, there are levels to it, and she sells it. She sells every scene that she's in. So the shooting was not terribly trying. It had to have been very difficult because of all of the effects shots and all of these special effects, all of the models and miniatures. And this is an interesting combination of CGI and practical effects, because there are a lot of models and miniatures and what used to be called matte paintings, and there are animatronics, but then there's also incredible on the street stunt work and old school makeup and production effects in this film. So the film was shot and it was completed without much difficulty. And Verhoeven, went off to edit the film, and he put together a cut that he liked, he was comfortable with. But when it went through the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, that's the so-called rating system, when he went through that the first time, the film was actually rated X for graphic violence. Now, I got to be honest with you, I think that's absolute horseshit. But it's what happened, and Verhoeven had to eliminate a couple of shots, which he was then able to put back for later viewings on TV and home video, DVD, or whatever the case might be. So the film opened in a very competitive summer movie season. Now, the reality is, since Jaws, every summer movie season is competitive. It's just a matter of how many really great movies and huge box office hits come out in a given summer. Now, 1990 was pretty stacked. You had Ghost, which ended up being the biggest hit of the year, I believe, but was the biggest hit of the summer. You had Die Hard 2, huge hit. Dollar for Dollar, I think it was a bigger hit than the first one. The first one was a hit, but it gained a huge following on home video and when it appeared on HBO. And they knew the second one was going to be a hit if they made a good movie, and they did. I think Rennie Harlin did a really good job with Die Hard 2, Die Harder. Tom Cruise's Days of Thunder was also summer 1990, was a big hit, and Gary Marshall's Pretty Woman, the film that put Julia Roberts over the top into superstardom, also a significant box office hit. Just can't kick the last of this laryngitis. I apologize for the coughing. But Total Recall ended up being, I believe, the second biggest box office grosser of that summer. And there were big movies still to come in the fall, like Goodfellas and Godfather 3 and Home Alone and Arnold's own Kindergarten Cop, which was a massive box office hit as well. Not as big a hit as Total Recall, but a significant hit. So Total Recall ended up grossing over $260 million, and inflation adjusted, you start calculating 34 years, it would have made over $500 million today. And up to that point in time, I had seen, I'm trying to think of all the Arnold movies that I had seen. I hadn't seen Raw Deal. I hadn't seen Red Sonja. I had seen Predator, which I absolutely loved. It had been my favorite Arnold film up to that point. The Running Man, which was probably my second favorite Arnold film up to that point. I had loved Twins. Red Heat with Jim Belushi was just okay. Didn't unabashedly love that. It's entertaining. It's just okay. But I was a big Arnold fan, and I hadn't seen the Conan movies or Red Sonja. I just wasn't interested. So that was my Arnold background. He was funny in Twins. Oh, and of course the first Terminator. Now, when Total Recall came out, and this is an important historical tidbit, Arnold filmed the trailer, the teaser trailer, which you can also find on YouTube. Doesn't have any scenes from the movie because the movie hadn't been shot yet. But Arnold filmed the teaser trailer while he was shooting Kindergarten Cop. And I don't even know how to say this properly. He has a haircut in the teaser trailer for Terminator 2. It's the haircut that he wore in Kindergarten Cop. And they tried to make it look like it was a Terminator crew cut, but you can tell, no, his hair is way too long to be a Terminator. But they went with it. What are they going to do? So we knew that Terminator 2 was in the pipeline when Total Recall hit, because people started talking about, holy shit, we saw a trailer for Terminator 2. I did not see Total Recall in theaters. In the summer of 1990, I feel like the only movie I saw in theaters that summer was Die Hard 2. Oh, I'm sorry, Back to the Future Part 3, I forgot. That was another big hit from the summer of 1990, and a terrific film, a worthwhile capper to that incredible franchise. First one was the best, but the second and third are both terrific, just in different ways. Did not see Tom Cruise's Days of Thunder, didn't see Pretty Woman, didn't see Ghost. Just Back to the Future 3 and Die Hard 2. Die Hard 2 saw with Dad at the old Syosset Triplex, a theater which has been gone since the 90s. And Back to the Future 3 we saw across the street from where his old apartment was, what's now called Eagle Rock. It's not a bad development, but the walls were very thin. You could hear your neighbors breathing. Was not good. Not a good setup. But people talked about how much they liked Total Recall. Dick Tracy, another $100 million gross from that summer. Should have seen that. I didn't. So I had friends who saw almost every big movie. And so they had seen Ghost, Pretty Woman, Days of Thunder, But those who saw Total Recall were all saying the same thing, which is, it's as good as Terminator, it's as good as Predator. This was a great movie, and it's more involved than you would expect. And this is something that critics of the day picked up on, which is that Arnold does not play the lead as a hulking, unfeeling, unthinking, robotic assassin, even though his character does kill a lot of people in the movie. He plays him as a guy who is scared and vulnerable and just wants to know what the fuck is going on, who stole my memory or what happened here. He played the character very, very well. And up to that point, it's probably his most carefully calibrated performance, because he gets to play the other role of Hauser. And even the way that he stands and the way that he looks with a smile, it feels like two different people. And that is not something that's insignificant. Like, Arnold really gave a terrific performance in that film. And I had discussed that in an earlier episode when I had gotten into most underrated film performances. I really, really like Arnold's role and what he does in this film. I didn't see it until it hit VHS or home video, if you prefer. And watching it for the first time on normal, 21 inch or 22 inch, whatever the size of my TV at my dad's place was, I'm not sure. But watching it on the biggest TV that we had in the place, film absolutely blew me away. I was expecting it to be good, but it was better than I thought it was going to be. It was, it's not just that it was gripping and exciting and the mind-twisting aspects. It's the fact that when the movie ended, and even me seeing it for the first time, I would have been 17 by the time it came to video, early 1991. I was sort of floored that the film was as dense as it was. That at the end of the movie, you can't say for certain, was this just a dream, or did Douglas Quaid go through all of this shit? I don't know, to this day. But for all of the action sequences, and there were some critics that didn't rate it as highly as they probably should have because they were put off by the graphic violence. But, I mean, come on, what the fuck? This is not a PG movie. This is not a kid's movie. The film, it's a movie of ideas and thought-provoking concepts of dreams and reality, and dreaming of a different reality. The movie gets into all of this while blowing shit up real good, letting Arnold be Arnold, still looking just phenomenal at age 43 as this film was shot, and he was still jacked. But the supporting performances are on point. Rachel Tickerton as Melina, very, very solid. Michael Ironside, Scream as Richter, and See You at the Potty Richter. Ronnie Cox, who had been in Deliverance many years earlier. A very unconventional choice for Cohaagen, but a good choice, and he really brings it, and he's terrific in the role. Even though it is a limited role, it's just the mustache-twirling villain. I like what Ronnie Cox brings to that role, and I guess Verhoeven had worked with him in RoboCop. I just thought of that. So he was familiar with him and wanted to work with him again, and felt that this role suited him perfectly. But the film succeeds in so many ways, even in the kind of artful misdirection where we're kind of thinking that Richter is more important than he actually is, because there are huge chunks of the film where Richter acts in an autonomous manner, where he almost comes across as if he considers himself Cohaagen's, like, almost his equal, and not that he's just a guy who's following orders. And when it turns out that all of Richter's attempts to kill Quaid, spoiler alert, were not commissioned by Cohaagen, and Richter was actually fucking up. It's an interesting line that the movie takes in that direction, because you're certainly not expecting it. And movies don't normally do that. They don't normally misdirect you in that particular kind of way. So what we're led to believe is Cohaagen had to almost change his plan on the fly because Richter was, in his words, going hog wild. The guy wasn't following fucking orders. Like, what the hell's he doing here? All of the action set pieces work, and work beautifully. Even the kind of characters who are in very heavy makeup, the seams don't show through. The makeup and the costuming is impeccably good. Even the 3-boob prostitute, fantastic, right? I mean, I'm not even going to make jokes. That was a great idea conceptually, and the execution. And Marshall Bell, an actor I've always enjoyed. He worked with Arnold in Twins a few years prior. What's the third rule? That guy. He plays, I forget the name of the man, but the mutant Quato kind of lives inside of him. And the animatronics and the makeup of this character called Quato is fantastic. Like, how do they even think of a character like that? It's mind-blowing. So I never actually wrote a paper on Total Recall when I was in film school. I wrote a paper on Predator, which was more in line with what we were talking about in that particular class, which was the idea of movies which allude with an A-L-L-U-D-E, movies which allude to actual historical events in the past without directly commenting on them. And the movie Predator it's a Vietnam War allegory. Pretty blatantly, clearly obvious that it's a Vietnam War allegory. Now, there are allegorical aspects of Total Recall, but it's not supposed to remind us, at least I didn't take it as, it's not supposed to remind us of a particular time in American history. I don't see Cohaagen as a particular leader. I mean, every bad guy you could say is Joseph Stalin, but I don't really think the movie is doing that. And I don't think that Philip K. Dick was interested in that either. Philip K. Dick passed away, unfortunately, and this is true, this part's true. He passed away after seeing some special effects shots and some process shots for Blade Runner. And he was a guy who was notoriously cranky and could be a little bit of a difficult personality. But he and Ridley Scott got along really well. And when Ridley met with Philip K. Dick, he just thought that Ridley Scott was a genius. He was in awe of what Ridley was doing and the concepts that he showed him for the film. They screened about 15 to 20 minutes worth of special effects and or process shots from his book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and he was okay with the title of Blade Runner from what we can gather. But Philip K. Dick died before Blade Runner premiered. He died before the film was released. He died before he could even see a rough cut and offer his thoughts. But for somebody who was notoriously cranky, he loved what Ridley Scott, the work that he showed him, incomplete as it was, but he loved it. He said, "You somehow got into my head, and this is exactly how I imagined it." And for somebody like that to tell a filmmaker, it's fucking amazing. And that, I would say that Ridley Scott, if he ever writes his memoirs, that's going to be in there. The fact that Philip K. Dick was so impressed. So where I'm going with that, he didn't have an opportunity. He was years away. He died 8 years before Total Recall came out. But I like to think he would have looked at Verhoeven's work and been just blown away by the level of detail, the craftsmanship, and what they were able to achieve with that film in total. Now, they were pretty sure because of Arnold and it was going to be R-rated and, the action elements, they were pretty sure it was going to be a box office hit. But you never know with these things because it's Hollywood. And Days of Thunder was not as big a hit as people expected, and Dick Tracy was not as big a hit as people expected. But on the other hand, Ghost was a bigger hit. Huge. I mean, Whoopi ended up winning Best Supporting Actress. Okay. I mean, I think Ghost is terrific. And Pretty Woman just blew away everyone's expectations. So Total Recall being such an enormous success, they were counting it would make at least 100, and it ended up doing 260. It was by far the biggest hit of Arnold's career, and Twins had been the biggest grosser up to that point in his career. Predator was a hit, but it didn't do crazy business. Twins did crazy business, and Total Recall did crazy business, and Kindergarten Cop did crazy business, and then Terminator 2 the next summer went absolutely berserk. But Arnold was right in the middle of his prime, where every movie he was making was a big hit, and his eye for material didn't desert him. It did nothing other than get him into the best possible projects for that particular time in his career. It's another reason why I have so much respect for his career, because he didn't have unlimited amounts of misses. He really couldn't afford any movies to bomb. He had to get things right, and he took his time, and he didn't rush into projects. And it's unfortunate that, for example, Stephen King was never really a big fan. He loves Arnold, but he was not a big fan of the movie version, which I fucking love, but I didn't read King's book. The only one of the Bachman books that I read was Thinner. Horrendous movie. I didn't read The Long Walk, which Hollywood tried to make into a movie for 3 decades. It ain't ever going to happen. It's too close to The Hunger Games. Hunger Games pretty much stole it. If you combine The Running Man and The Long Walk, you have The Hunger Games, more or less. That's why King has never really had anything nice to say about the author of The Hunger Games, because he feels he didn't come out and say she kind of took my ideas, but she kind of took his ideas. She used a lot of stuff that he had come up with. Did not plagiarism. We're not talking about that. But King is such a fertile ground for borrowing, for paying homage to. And that's basically what The Hunger Games did. But yeah, 34 years ago today, Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall, a phenomenal film. And I think it's streaming free on Paramount Plus, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a movie that was buzzed about, and the reality of it is even better than expectation. And that's another thing that Arnold was able to do. Terminator 2 the following summer had unbelievable lead-in and incredible buzz that built for months, and the movie still destroyed expectations. That's a star. And that's a star working with some of the best craftsmen in the business. And Paul Verhoeven, an absolute genius, an incredible eye, and not really a taskmaster, a guy who knows how to, schmooze and get along with his cast. But working with Verhoeven, well, first Ivan Reitman in Twins, working with Ivan Reitman, working with Paul Verhoeven, working with Ivan Reitman again, Kindergarten Cop, and then working with James Cameron. It's just one home run hitter of a filmmaker in the genre in which they were working, and knowing that the script would play, and knowing that the special effects that were pitched to him were going to work. It's not going to look stupid. We're not going to embarrass ourselves. And the costuming is going to be on point, and the models and the miniatures and the makeup effects, everything's going to work. And this is going to be a home run. And it's exactly what it was. And I feel, as far as the critical reaction, it got very good reviews. It's in the 80s on Rotten Tomatoes. But I believe that time has been especially kind to Total Recall. You can't and you will not find anyone seeing the film for the first time now not saying, holy shit, I love T2, but this might be Arnold Schwarzenegger's best film. The estimation of it has only been enhanced with time. Total Recall, released June 1st, 1990, 34 years ago today, directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rachel Ticotin, Sharon Stone, Michael Ironside, and Ronnie Cox. This has been episode number 202 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Saturday evening here with me. As you can tell, I've arrived home. But if you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 203 real soon. Till then, see you at the party, Richter. Peace.